Good morning, everyone. My name is Anthony Chamont, safety engineer from Tyndall Oliver. As always, I'll do the quick little, everyone received the email notice with the link to how to get here. Dennis's and my contact info are there if anybody has any questions or comments, feedback. There will be a GoToWebinar survey at the end of the presentation, but important link here is the link to the Tampa Bay Traffic Safety Academy page, which takes you to our webpage that has the webinar topics for all the upcoming webinars for the year, as well as links here to the prior recordings, the PowerPoints of the presentations, and the recordings as well. So if you missed someone or if you want to share this webinar with anybody, send them to this location. It's just a web page, and they can see the presentation on there. Down at the bottom of this page as well, we have the request forms for PDH for professional development hours. I will be adding instructions on how to get your AICP credits to this as well. Dennis will talk about that a little bit more. But I wanted to let everybody know this information is out there. With that, I will hand it over to Dennis for the official webinar intro.
Good morning. This is Dennis Falloon, and I wanted to, I'm the District 7 Safety Academy Coordinator and Consultant, and want to welcome you to the second District 7 Safety Webinar for 2017. Also, I would like to say that today's webinar is covering the Strategic Highway Safety Plan with 2016 update, and it's being presented by Joe Santos, a professional engineer, who's the state safety engineer working out of the FDOT State Safety Office in Tallahassee. There will be a few poll questions today for the presentation, and Anthony and Joe will cover those with you. And as Anthony mentioned, there will be a survey at the end of this presentation. We appreciate any feedback you can give us on that. With that, I'm going to kind of give you an introduction to the Academy. A number of you have probably heard it before, but what I wanted to explain is that this Academy is the District 7 Local Agency Traffic Safety Academy, and it's to provide information on safety-related issues to enhance your local safety program. This is the 5th year of the Safety Academy. Began back last month, January 18th. It's supposed to go through to December 13th, 2017. Topics will be at a minimum of 1 hour, but no more than 2 hours. You have a 2-hour window. We don't normally use that. But the length of each webinar is dependent on the complexity of the presentation. To register, the site that Anthony showed you has the registration link. And also, here it is on my slide. And also, you can go to the Safety Academy webinar. As I mentioned today, we're covering the Strategic Highway Safety Plan 2016 update today. And you can see it on the list here that it also shows those upcoming topics. And just want to make a clarification at this point, too, that when you register, you automatically get registered for all of the topics of the District Safety Academy. And if by some chance you cannot attend, it's no problem. You can still go out and check out the PowerPoint and listen to the recording. Also, this session is being submitted for AICP CM credit. I want to give you a note that the AICP members, please check out the website and check under the District 7 Safety Academy site under the General Resource section, and there's a step-by-step instruction to look up the courses for credit. I want to mention about the PDHs for professional engineers order. As you know, in the past, you always see this slide. It tells you that you have to submit your information to Larry Hagan, and this is the kind of the detail for it. It's also out on the web page. But here's a few slides I have from Larry Hagan. He's not participating today. The renewal is due February 28th, 2017. So if you're short your hours, you need to submit your forms to him. And the date on the certificate is the date your form is received. And so you would email it to him, and here's his fax number also. That's also listed out there. And he stated also that you need 18 hours of continuing education to renew your license, not just 8 hours like it was in the past under a few prior renewal cycles. And the 18 hours are made up of 4 categories: laws and rules 1 hour, ethics 1 hour, area of practice 4 hours, and topics pertinent to the practice of engineering 12 hours. And any CE hours taken after February 28, 2017 will result in a $100 delinquent fee and your license being placed in a delinquent status until the additional fee is paid. And my last slide is just questions, need assistance. This is what you can contact me if you have any questions. But 2 main things. The 3 slides that I just showed about for the PEs, Anthony has posted out online on the website, so you can get it, and they're in there also as handouts, and also the instructions how to access for the AICP credits. And I would like to point out one more thing. We've gone through a little bit of a transition here, not getting into the gory details, but some of the 2016 are out there. The additional ones should be posted by the end of the week, and then the first one for 2017 should be going out there end of the week or first thing beginning of next week. With that, I want to turn it over to Joe Santos.
As I transition the presentation to Joe, I wanted to mention to the audience, if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the chat, and we'll use our judgment as to whether or not we'll talk about the question at the moment or hold the questions till the end. We also have a couple of poll questions real quick to find out a little bit more about you and your knowledge of the Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Let's go through those real quick.
You have to share your screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do need to. No, that's coming up, right? Do you see the poll questions, audience? Yeah, they're answering the question. I will share I'll make Joe the presenter. So what working category best describes you? Federal employee, state employee, local government employee, consultant, or just a concerned citizen? About 60% of the audience has answered so far. We'll give you guys a few more seconds. You gotta wake up and pay attention. Interactive webinars. These are good. All right, I'll close the polling on this and show the results. I don't believe that Joe can see them, so I'll let him know the numbers. We have 0% federal employees. 14% of the audience is a state employee. 51% of the audience is a local government employee, and I seem to have misspelled the word employee there. Sorry, guys. 33% are consultants, and 2% are concerned citizens. So mostly local. We have a mix between consultants and state employees. We have another qualifying question to see what type of person you are here in the audience. Which of the safety E's are you? Are you involved in engineering, education, enforcement, emergency response, or in the everyone else category? This is a good question, Joe. I'm actually interested to see the results of this. So far, the results that I'm seeing coming in, we have to do a little bit of outreach or other E's to get them coming to this webinars, because we have a pretty strong representation in engineering and fairly low in the others. Looks like most of the audience has answered. Let's close that and share the results. 93% of the audience today is involved in the engineering field. 7% in the education, and the rest are 0. We have no enforcement, no emergency response, and no citizens or anybody else in that category. That's really good information for us to know.
Yeah.
And one more question pertinent to the topic today. How familiar are you with the 2016 Florida Strategic Highway Safety Plan? The choices are never heard of it, somewhat familiar, or you could teach this webinar if needed. I like those. Yeah, sounds like we've got a pretty good audience here for you, Joe. It's looking like around 11% have never heard of this strategic highway safety plan thing before. 86% are somewhat familiar, and only 3% of your audience could do the job for you if you get to take off early. So you've got your work cut out for you, sir.
Awesome. Thank you, Anthony. Awesome. Yeah, it's always nice to know if I got people in the group that can teach the class. So, so thank you, Dennis and Anthony, for the intro. As Dennis mentioned, my name is Joe Santos. I'm with Florida Department of Transportation. I am the state safety engineer. And Anthony, if you could confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. All right. So I must confess I'm presenting live from Valencia College. I'm here as part of a seminar today from FHWA on Minority Institutes of Higher Education. So we're going to have, once I finish this presentation, I'm going to go back to the room and share some of my safety story and profession with some other folks here. So good stuff. So I was going to say live from Valencia College. So this is good. This is good. All right. So let me get started. The presentation, really, a lot of this is just going to be. Whoops. Sorry, my screen's not advancing. Oh, there we go. The main focus of the presentation is just going to be on the Strategic Highway Safety Plan update overall. Ideally, I would love for each of you to have a copy right in front of you, so you could be kind of going through this page by page. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to spend the next hour or so, as long as my battery holds up, speaking to the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. One of the big updates is that we took a new approach to our 2016 plan. We're tying it as part of our bigger plan. As part of our transportation plan policy element. So next screen kind of speaks to that. So our Florida Transportation Plan policy element is that long-term, high-level, all-encompassing plan that includes safety along with capacity, maintenance, etc. It's just one single arching statewide plan. What the Strategic Highway Safety Plan does is bring into that an implementation part of our FTP. It's very focused, statewide, data-driven plan. It's a 5-year comprehensive plan that's based on some guidance from FHWA on how frequently to update your plan. And with the plan, this updated plan, we have 13 emphasis areas to guide Florida safety efforts. So in regards to the plan, it's a all-encompassing plan. That was why I had Anthony ask the question as far as what E's we have at the table, because as part of this safety plan effort, it's including all of our safety partners, not just the engineering part with DOT, but also our other enforcement efforts with the Department of Highway Safety Motor Vehicles, our Florida Highway Patrol, FHP, our Florida Sheriff's Association, our Florida Police Chiefs Associations, our NPO and Metropolitan Planning Organizations, our FACERS group, FHWA, our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and our Motor Carrier Safety, FMSCA. So one of the things getting into the introduction here, as I mentioned, it's a statewide plan. As I mentioned, it's updated every 5 years. And really the SHSP and other safety plans as far as from other modes, the focus of this particular plan is just on the transportation, vehicle transportation mode. We would look at other plans, specifically safety in regards to aviation, for example. So the SHSP and safety plans for other modes align not only with FTP, but also with national programs funded by the Federal Highway Administration the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, or FMCSA, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The data-driven SHSP focuses on 13 emphasis areas, which reflect ongoing and emerging highway safety issues in Florida. Key strategies related to each emphasis area are identified, as well as overarching strategies that apply across emphasis areas. So each of the strategies, and I'll be speaking to these at a high level, encompass each of those 4 E's: the engineering, education, enforcement, and emergency response. So along with addressing each of those strategies, aligning with the 4 E's, it also defines a framework for specific implementation activities to work through ultimately going to 0 deaths. So I think it's important just to take a moment speaking to the numbers in regards to the fatality numbers. We have seen a general increase in the numbers, in our fatality numbers, and even though I don't have 2016 numbers there, we have seen an increase in the 2016 numbers. So going back on the introduction of our Strategic Highway Safety Plan, ultimately our vision is to get to 0 deaths. So once we, as far as the plan overall, I thought it was important here. This kind of lays out the framework. I'll speak into most of these, the different factors that influence the fatalities, some of the key trends shaping Florida's transportation system. How can we improve safety on both state and local roads? Since this effort that District 7 is taking the lead on really focuses a lot on that local and working with local, and I'd like to spend a lot of time on that. Then I'll get into the Strategic Highway Safety Plan emphasis areas, some of the strategies. There's a listing there of all of the different emphasis areas. The big thing when I get called to the end of the presentation is specific action items that we're asking all of our safety partners to work through for implementation of the plan. So one of the questions, under fundamental questions to ask, is why was the plan developed? The plan was developed so that as part of our Highway Safety Implementation Program, Highway Safety Improvement Program, a Strategic Highway Safety Plan is required as part of that program, but it's also a best practice. And as I mentioned, in working through the safety part, it's important to work with each of our partners. So the data that we used with DHSMV looked at the 2011 through 2015 data. As part of the effort, we also looked at extensive partner and public input through our FTP, Florida Transportation Plan update process. So a lot of the parallel efforts with the FTP, we incorporate that to the SHSP, reaching out to more than 15,000 participants, steering committee, regional forums, also looking at the public, including biped, commercial vehicles, changing technologies, etc. As I mentioned also earlier, this plan is one that's it's a statewide implementation plan. It's not just a DOT plan. So part of that process is really working with our strategic safety coalitions to really implement our plan through the public and private sectors. And then also lastly, with coordinating with each of our NPOs, 27 NPOs, and relating those goals and incorporating those into our plan. All right, so some of the factors that influence the fatalities. We have seen a trend, an upward trend in our Florida population, 4.8% increase shown here. Our domestic product, more people, more business activity, so it's over 20% change in our gross domestic product. Our the big thing on the safety in regards to impacts is also awareness of the VMT, or vehicle miles traveled. So we have seen an upward trend, 7.7% statewide. Unfortunately, along with the VMT increase, we have seen an increase also in serious injuries. And then lastly, comparing just what's going on nationwide, we've also seen fatalities increase. So I think looking at nationwide, I believe the 2016 numbers are also showing an increase. The main takeaway from this is that we've seen, with an increase in population, an increase in VMT, we've seen trends of increased serious injuries, and nationally the increased numbers is just an underlying renewed emphasis on addressing safety as part of the plan to bring the numbers down. So some other key trends, we just have 80% driving alone as compared to only 10% carpooling. We see 9 out of the 10 Floridians living in urban areas. We see licensed drivers increasing while teen drivers decreasing. We see growth of population, and we also see a pretty substantial growth in visitors. All factors that affect safety, addressing safety. So getting into the improving safety on both state and local roads, the reality of it is that Florida's transportation system is large, multimodal, and owned by a number of entities, including the state government, local governments, the federal government, and the private sector. So we know that, but the general public isn't aware of knowing who's maintaining or who's in charge of a particular roadways. So what's important here in this process is looking through how can we address safety jointly, working together, and that's what the plan helps to address. So just to kind of gain awareness of our state highways, we're looking at roughly about 10% or 12,000 centerline miles of the roadway. For local roads, we're looking at the remainder, nearly at 90%, 108,000 centerline miles. So with that, the difference is that we do see a lot more traffic. That's on the right there. The centerline miles, 10% state, nearly 90 local. For the VMT, we're looking at about roughly 46% local, 54% state. And then the fatalities, nearly 60% or 56% state and 44% local. The main takeaway from this is that we've got a fairly substantial on local roads, fairly substantial number of VMT, and a substantial number of fatalities, including on local roads. The challenge, though, is that it's 90% or nearly 90% of our centerline miles, so we see a lot more dispersion of those fatalities on local roads, which is a challenge to work through. Okay, so now getting into the 13 emphasis areas, and this particular slide is a two-part slide because it shows the engineering or the cogwheel taking the lead on some of the emphasis areas, the lane departure, intersection, and work zones have the engineering lead. On the education side, we see the motorcycle, teen drivers, Asian road users, distracted driving, pedestrian and bicyclists taking the lead. The leading enforcement is speeding and aggressive driving, commercial motor vehicles, and occupant protection. And really emergency response, even though they don't have a primary lead in any of these, they are supporting the majority of the emphasis areas. Now, there's the one here on the traffic records. Traffic records is another E that doesn't have a specific E attached to it, but it is like emergency response, one that fits into each of the different emphasis areas. All right, so another, I thought I like this slide here because it kind of shows the magnitude of the different emphasis areas and a breakdown by the fatalities. The lane departure, the highest here we see, on down to work zone crashes. So we've sorted them here by fatalities, but you could also see that dispersion of serious injuries for each of these emphasis areas. Now, what's important to note here is that these numbers are all combined. So, for example, for a lane departure crash, if you have a lane departure crash and it involves speeding and aggressive driving, that was a teen driver and distracted, that same crash will be included in each of those different areas. So if you were just to total up the numbers, it would be more than what the actual crash numbers were. All right, so once we get into the specific E's, I would like to spend a little bit of time on how each of these E's, high level, is working to address safety. So on the engineering side, engineering are focused on the identifying and developing and deploying engineering solutions. So some engineering solutions that we've been doing statewide have been, for example, we have a statewide lighting initiative addressing nighttime pedestrian crashes. That would be a good example of a engineering countermeasure. Another one that's been very popular, especially in District 7, has been the rectangular rapid flashing beacons at mid-block crossings. Another great engineering countermeasure addressing pedestrians. Along with the engineering, we're looking at incorporating policies and practices into roadway design, construction, operations, and maintenance. Especially as one of the emphasis areas in work zones, construction, we've been working a lot with construction, lane departure, we've been working a lot with roadway design, but going ahead of myself there. The other part is, on the engineering side, is being sure to ensure infrastructure design allows for safe and efficient access for first responders. Very important part to incorporate into our design. So on the enforcement side, we're looking at targeted enforcement activities. In fact, just this week on enforcement, there was in Tallahassee, there was a announcement on the Arrive Alive campaign. That really is helping to really focus on the DUI or distracted driving to help us use with enforcement efforts to reduce those types of crashes. As the slide says, increase enforcement of high-risk driving behaviors, and then also enforcement, improve the prosecution and education of traffic-related cases. So it's about having the enforcement officer out in the public enforcing the laws, but it's also important on a legal standpoint to enforce those laws from judiciously. All right, so on the education side, we're talking about both educating all road users on sharing the road. We're looking at the other part is including public awareness. I know within our safety office, we've been directly involved with a lot of public safety campaigns at different sporting events and billboards around the state. There's also been a lot of training that we've been doing throughout the state, both on the engineering and just the public information overall with training and education. Another program that we're involved with that ties in well with the education is our Safe Routes to School program. That program looks at not only the engineering type of improvements adjacent to schools, but also teaching students and such on road safety. And then lastly, emergency response, improving that emergency response time, along with not just the time, but also training to the first responders to be prepped and ready to handle specific types of injuries that occur, whether it be a pedestrian or a motorist-related traffic crash. All right, so that right there covers most of the intro and overarching strategies. I'm going to get into some of the specific emphasis areas now. So, Anthony, is there any questions that you've received so far?
At the moment, there are no questions.
Okay.
I don't know if you generally. I mean, I can hold this for myself till the end.
Yeah.
But talking about the strategic highway safety plan, when you Google that and try to find it, you also come up with just the general state highway safety plan, not the strategic. What's the relationship between the two?
Yeah. Great question. So, the highway safety plan, or the HSP, is the annual plan that our office, the state safety office, does, that focuses on the more behavior-related activities, or the funding that we receive from our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or HTSA. So that's an annual plan that's done, working with all of our education and enforcement partners. So that's why you'll come up with that highway safety plan when you do that Google search.
One question popped up into the chat here is we're talking about the 3 E's. We've got the engineering, enforcement, education.
Yeah.
Where does legislation fit into this? Like changes in laws and changes in rules, and like how does that work?
Well, on the legislation side, we do work a lot with our. One example that comes to mind is with our Bike Ped Coalition. We have a legislative portion there. So it's kind of indirectly handled through our different coalitions. As a state employee, we're unable to lobby for specific items, but what we can do is educate elected officials on our process, our plan, and such. So a lot of that's handled through our coalitions.
So that would be the example they came up with, and the question was, with related to distracted driving, some teen driving, texting rules, texting laws, and requiring driver's ed in school, and those things are done through those coalitions. Yeah,
and we work a lot with those partner agencies, like the Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, and our Department of Education. We would work with them individually through our coalition efforts for that.
And there's a pre-question on the next slide before you even get into it, Joe. The lane departure classes, as you're talking about it, if you have any numbers, I don't suspect that you do, but any of the technologies in cars, like the lane holding and blind side alerts, and the cars that automatically keep you in the lanes, have we seen any figures or numbers on reduction of crashes because of those technological advancements in cars related to lane departure? Yeah. So when you get to that slide.
Yeah, I'm there. Personally, I have not come across anything specifically that shows specifically what the crash modification factor would be for the new technology in vehicles that informs the driver that they're leaving the road and such. I still think that it's still fairly new, but I'd have to do a little bit of research to validate if in fact there is a specific a crash reduction factor or a crash modification factor for that new technology. But right now I'm not aware of any. Okay. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. No, yeah, that's the last question that we had. That's sort of as a lead into your lane departure slide.
Okay, sweet. All right, so now I'm going to get into more of the lane, the different emphasis areas. And, okay, awesome. So when I talk about a lane departure, I'm talking about a vehicle leaving the travel lane by improperly passing, crossing the median into oncoming traffic, failing to keep in the lane, running off the road, over-correcting, over-swerving. And usually on these lane departure crashes, we find that the severity of the crashes is really high. So right on this slide here, I'm talking about lane departures represent 30% of crashes, yet result in 47% of all deaths. And when we look at the fatal and serious injuries, we have seen pretty level or pretty increase, pretty much of an increase in both the serious injuries and the fatalities. So it is I look at it as an opportunity. There are things that we can be doing to address lane departure. As what was shown on the earlier slides, engineering has the lead with lane departure. And some of the things that we're doing engineering related is actually looking at more systemic improvements to reduce the lane departure crash in itself. So we're looking at sign and marking enhancements on curves with crash histories, center line rumble strips on rural two-lane highways, edge line rumble stripes on rural highways, delineation to address crashes during nighttime and poor visibility conditions. Countermeasure we use here in Florida, the high friction surface treatment, where on curves you may have not sufficient friction, especially under wet conditions, helping to keep the vehicle on the road. That's a good countermeasure. And one that we're looking at investigating is where we may have particular sections of roadway where we would look at if there might be an opportunity to reduce some of the fixed objects, including rural trees. So, of course, that would be on a site-by-site basis. I'm not saying that we're just going to cut down all trees, but specific sites may find itself to be a direct safety benefit from removing that fixed object. So along that note, I wanted to also mention that we have included wrong-way crashes into this lane departure section. And I want to mention that I want to give kudos to District 7 Tampa area for really aggressively addressing the wrong-way crashes. So the department really pursued addressing wrong-way crashes through aggressively installing and enhanced signage and pavement markings at all the freeway interchange ramps. Well, excuse me, at freeway ramps, including the vehicle, along with vehicle altering technology to warn drivers. So there's different improvements that we've been doing as an agency, innovative type, that are making it more clear to the driver that they are, in fact, traveling the wrong way on some of these sections. So some of the strategies I wanted to share with the lane departure, I'm going to reference the Highway Safety Manual. That's one tool in our toolbox to help us more address proactively safety through a predictive tool or a predictive process. Other tools I mentioned about that systemic approach or those countermeasures would be another tool to help us address the most prevalent crash types and contributing factors, and then also looking at what would be the most effective countermeasures to reduce the crashes where the lane departures are a current problem and where there is future crash potential. So the HSM, Highway Safety Manual, gets into that crash potential more. The other strategy is to investigate and implement new and innovative countermeasures, including best practices used by other jurisdictions. So I know in some of the best practices we recently have brought into the agency is the use of rumble stripes. So those are pretty new as far as systemically putting those in place. So we're still evaluating those to see just how much of an impact they're going to make to reduce lane departure crashes. Another important part, I mentioned about the overlap with the E's, is that we've got the focused enforcement and education efforts to address driver risk factors such as DUI or distracted driving that could cause a lane departure crash. Speed enforcement is another important part of this to bring the numbers down. And then lastly, important strategy is supporting the NPOs and local governments to address safety, lane departure safety on local and regional roads. All right, so now we're going to get into the impaired driving. This one involves about 1/4 of all motor vehicle deaths in Florida. It's defined as driving under the influence of alcohol and/or illegal prescription over-the-counter drugs and/or illegal drugs. Impaired driving is a complex social issue that involves multiple areas of the criminal justice, healthcare, and education system. So this one is very involved. It's one that I do not deal with directly, but it's one that with our enforcement folks that we do our due diligence to work through. And this would be one of those areas that we would fund as part of our highway safety plan. So looking at the data, we have seen a little slight increase. Slight increase in our fatalities from 749 to 851, and a slight, pretty much a leveling out for the serious injuries. So some of the strategies we look at is included in the plan is the combined high visibility enforcement with increased public awareness of the dangers, costs, and consequences of impaired driving. Now, I mentioned about billboards and such at sporting events. This is also an area that we also team up with national public information items that are posted via either commercials or billboards and such. So the other focus of this on the strategies is that we want to reduce the repeat impaired driving behavior through targeted enforcement, effective and efficient prosecution, and enhanced penalties for subsequent offenses, and improved education, intervention, and treatment of substance abuse. And then the last strategy that I'd like to speak to is just the training of law enforcement to properly identify the opportunities to prevent or counteract impaired driving. And as far as enforcement, even in our courts, and training personnel. So impaired driving, emphasis area led by our enforcement folks. So the next one's pedestrian and bicyclists. Looking at the data here, we looked at the fatals and serious injuries. We have seen an ever-increasing increase in our numbers between the 14-15, and unfortunately we are seeing increases in our 2016 data. This part, in regards to the bike ped, one of the things that's really, I think, is a big factor in how we're addressing bike ped is our Florida Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Coalition. It was finalized in 2013. It has a very extensive pedestrian and bicycle strategic safety plan. The goal is to reduce pedestrian and bicyclist-related fatalities and serious injuries. And the focused initiative is really to improve pedestrian and bicycle safety that has really promoted one of the department initiatives in regards to the Complete Streets policy and implementation plan, along with intersection lighting, as I mentioned earlier, our updated design guidance, comprehensive communication plan, high visibility enforcement efforts, strong emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle safety and driver education, revisions of Florida's driver's handbook and driver's license exams, and improved emergency response to victims of traffic crashes. These, I would say that all of these specific countermeasures are due in a strong effect because of the Florida Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Coalition efforts. Okay, so let's get into intersections here. Intersections is engineering focus. We've seen a slight increase in our serious injuries, in our fatalities. That same trend from 14 to 15 is still continues to 2016. Some of the strategies we're looking at in addressing intersections is basically looking at reducing the frequency and severity of crashes of intersections by limiting conflicts, regime-metric traffic control, and lighting improvements. So part of that direct link is with our access management efforts and our teaming up with our various offices, including traffic ops, for a screening process to determine the proper intersection type at specific intersections throughout the state. Also on the intersections is to institute and promote highway safety manual analysis along with road safety audits or assessments. The road safety audits is a multidisciplinary approach to looking at addressing safety at particular locations. That multidisciplinary would include all of the E's that I mentioned earlier. Next strategy there is traditional and alternative designs. So one of the most popular designs that we're trying to encourage more use throughout the state is roundabouts. We've seen a substantial decrease in severity of crashes, the use of roundabouts. So as an agency, we're pushing more of that. And then lastly, just improving awareness and visibility of traffic control devices so all users can safely navigate an intersection. Examples of this would be a signal head per lane. May drive through a facility where you may have one signal that's sharing two lanes, may be confusing to the driver. So we try to increase that visibility of traffic control by use of the signal head per lane. All right, for occupant protection. We have seen also a slight increase in fatalities, a slight decrease in serious injuries. This one, some of the strategy we have seen in comparing our, I guess, one of the important parts in occupant protection is being sure we have all drivers wearing a safety belt. So here in Florida, we're showing a higher average safety belt use rate, 89.4%, comparing our national average. So some of the strategies on occupant protection, the laws and such, determining which population groups are high at risk for not wearing safety belts, and target some public outreach to address that. And once again, this is a really strong emphasis on using the media and including social media to improve that public awareness of wearing safety belts. All right, so getting into one of our vulnerable road users are the motorcyclists. We do have I'll want to point out that we do have a Florida Motorcycle Safety Coalition. This coalition was formed in 2008. Includes representatives from more than 25 public and private agencies and organizations. As you see in the middle of the screen there, Right Smart Florida is a focus of them. SMART stands for the S as in say, no to drinking and riding. M is for make yourself visible to motorists. A is for always, as in always wear a helmet. R is for ride, as in ride in control. And T is for train regularly. So Ride Smart Florida. So some of the strategies here: improve the skills of motorcyclists through increased participation in rider education programs, promote the safe operation of motorcycles, and consider unique vulnerabilities and characteristics of motorcyclists when designing and improving transportation infrastructure. All right, so one of the things I like to do when we speak to motorcyclists in the data, we're referring to motorcyclists include motor scooter riders and represent 7% of licensed drivers, 3% of registered motor vehicles, and less than 1% of traffic on Florida roadways, yet represent 19% of Florida's traffic fatalities and 12% of serious injuries. That's verbatim from the plan. I thought that was an important point to bring out. All right, so moving into our aging road users, this also has a coalition, Safe Mobility for Life Coalition. The coalition consists of almost 30 member organizations who work together to develop, distribute, and evaluate transportation safety and mobility resources to benefit not only older adults, but families and caregivers, engineers, planners, communities, law enforcement, aging service providers, and healthcare professionals. On the data on this one, we have seen an increase in both serious injuries and fatalities since between 2014 and 2015. Really, the strategies that are mentioned here are really a key part of the coalition efforts. So it's really about those three: the promoting and educating drivers on the comprehensive driving evaluations, expanding transportation choices, and develop and distribute resources and tools to support driving skills. All right. Commercial motor vehicles. This one we've seen an upward and downward trend since 2011. We've seen for this last reporting period an upward trend for both fatal and serious injuries. This one, just to focus on some of the strategies here, targeted enforcement for violations in high crash locations, public awareness program, and collaborating with trucking and bus industries on programs. This one is a really good example. I mentioned the Arrive Alive campaign with Florida Highway Patrol. There's a direct relationship with the efforts from that Arrive Alive and working with our Department of Highway Safety Motor Vehicles and FHP on addressing commercial motor vehicles. All right, for speeding and aggressive driving, for this particular one, also with working with our enforcement efforts on this to bring those numbers down on speeding and aggressive. This one, in some regards, in regards to aggressive, may be underreported. We're really relying on crash reports to determine if, in fact, the driver is aggressive. So there might be some, either both for aggressive and distracted driving, some underreporting. But we see here a slight decrease in the serious injuries, an increase in the fatalities. Some of the strategies that we're looking at for speeding and aggressive driving, enforcing speeding and aggressive driving laws, evaluating the crash hotspots to implement appropriate engineering countermeasures for some of the speeding areas. And then lastly, conduct community-based public awareness and education regarding speeding and aggressive driving. All right, so on teen driving, on this one we have seen, I thought there was an important bullet to bring out here. Motor vehicle crashes are the leading causes of death for U.S. teens. Speaking from having a family of 3 teenagers, 2 of which are driving, I can tell you that when my teen drivers are out there driving, I do my best to teach them adequate safety and such, but it's still in learning mode for them. So it's really hard to work through this, especially when you have your own teenagers driving. But we have seen the number change. Speaking to that, we have seen a slight decrease in the serious injuries and increase in the fatalities. We do have a Teen Safe Driving Coalition. I think this is important because it really helps to keep the right people together to talk through and engage the teen drivers. Just going to read a little snippet here from the SHSP. Teen Driving Safe Coalition. Leading the change in Florida to improve traffic safety among teens is the Teen Safe Driving Coalition, which is focused on reducing the number of teen drivers being killed or seriously injured in traffic crashes. The coalition is working to expand the network of individuals and partners who are involved in the teen safe driving effort and is conducting extensive outreach and evaluation education. So some of the partners working with the coalition is Students Against Destructive Decisions. And some of the strategies is also not only working with agencies such as SADD, but also educating stakeholders, educating parents, and working with law enforcement agencies to increase enforcement of the graduated driver's licensing. All right, just a few more on the distracted driving. This is the one that I mentioned earlier that we've seen the numbers slightly decrease, but I think on this regard, we are leaning on the crash report to tell us if in fact it is a distracted driving. So it's likely underreported, but so some of the important stats here is at any given daylight moment across America, 660,000 drivers are using cell phones. So just that, this is a quick fact from our National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Just a quick fact to know that we've got a lot of people out there using their cell phones and driving. So some of the strategies that we're using to bring those numbers down is basically looking at some if they are distracted, doing some engineering countermeasures such as rumble strips and stripes, flashing beacons and warning signs, basically to make the driver aware that if they are leaving the roadway, to get back on. Some of this change in societal attitudes. There's been a lot of I've seen on the media, AT&T and such having commercials to show that discourage any distracted driving or using cell phones while driving. There have been some efforts with collaboration and encouraging collaboration with other public and private organizations to offer innovative solutions, such as policies that prohibit distracted driving when using company or organization vehicles. All right, so our last one before traffic records, work zones. On that middle stat there, speaking to in 2014, Florida had the third highest number of Florida traffic crashes and work zones in the nation. That's one stat we'd like to try to break down. Unfortunately, we're seeing upward trends based on the 14-15 data from 430 to 495, along with the fatalities. So we are seeing increases. Now, we are being, as an agency, very proactive in addressing work zones. There's a lot of advanced technology that we've been putting in place to make our work zone safety better, such as the automated work zone information systems and simplified dynamic lane merge systems and portable changeable message signs and key warning systems. So there's been a lot of advanced technology that we've been encouraging within our roadway area, our work zones. The work zone safety, educating them, there's efforts that do nationally to educate the public on the importance of work zone safety. Looking at other countermeasures to put in place to make the driver aware of or feasible of the road conditions within the work zone. And then lastly, working with law enforcement to regulate the speed in work zones. All right, so our last emphasis area that is really unique to all the other ones is our traffic records and information systems. This one really is to promote the timeliness and make the crash records complete, accurate, uniform, and timely. And so one of the stats that came out of the plan was looking at how much of our reports are submitted electronically. So we have seen a general increase, 90% back in 2015. We've seen some increases even more. Ideally, we'd like to get to 100% of enforcement agencies submitting electronic crash reports. So as I mentioned, it's the main focus of the the actual Traffic Records Coordinating Committee, along with Traffic Records Information Systems, is really to focus on addressing those complete, accurate, uniform, and timely traffic records data. And then also to promote the use of the traffic records to help with better decision making, and then also use that data to facilitate collaboration across agencies, and lastly to create unique or specific data fields across agencies to address the emphasis areas of our strategic highway safety plan. All right, so it's a lot of moving parts, So with that, I think it's important as we talk about a transition to implementation is to speak through the coalitions that exist and to help us work through these specific areas. The one I didn't mention, Lane Departure Intersection Coalition. That one is one that I'm directly involved with. Up to this point, it's been primarily with DOT staff. In fact, we're working through a lane departure implementation plan now. But I do anticipate a lot more local participation in the upcoming year.
Joe, are you there? We seem to have lost Joe. Let's give him a minute here. Maybe he'll be able to reconnect.
Am I back?
Yes, we hear you now.
Sorry, I was using my phone as a hotspot, and somebody called me to turn the hotspot off. So, sorry about that. All right. Okay. So, some of the guiding principles I wanted to speak to high level is really working through this, continuing to support and working with each of our stakeholders to drive down the fatalities in each of these emphasis areas. We encourage developing ad hoc working groups or additional coalitions to address each of the emphasis areas, coordinating with NPOs. It's all about collaboration now across to each of our partners to work through this plan. So the other part, embracing innovation in all aspects of highway safety. The question that was raised earlier about the car technology, that's great. But there's even vehicle-to-vehicle infrastructure or roadway-to-vehicle infrastructure that we're looking at innovation to address safety. So the other thing, as far as how do we better serve our customers, we need to help communicate this safety concern that we have in a clear and consistent safety message to the public, and we need to also work through how to best accommodate safe for all road users. I mentioned the Complete Streets Initiative. I believe that's a perfect example of what we're doing as an agency to accommodate safe movement for all of our road users. Big question here is how do we improve data and performance? I think going back to that public image, I know what we've been doing within our safety office has been doing having similar webinars like what District 7 is doing just on the traffic data, and also publishing specific data elements on a user-friendly format, such as in a GIS environment. So that's been really a key part on the data part. So the other part is working with our NPOs to establish specific target setting and performance measures to ultimately work together on how best to bring the numbers down. All right, so getting into call to action for implementing the strategic highways update in regard to updating specific safety plans that either local agencies or various states have or coalitions have to address each of the emphasis areas of our strategic highway safety plan. Demonstrate, support, and promote the plan with all of our partners. Promote the initiatives that are included in the plan to reduce fatality and serious injuries, and then support from a local, state, and national perspective some of the safety initiatives that are rolling out to reduce fatal and serious injury crashes. And lastly, bottom line is that the safety is for Florida residents and visitors is a top priority. We need help. We need help from all of our safety partners. We need to work together. That's a big buzzword in working through this plan. And we need to engage our new partners and follow through for strategies outlined in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So ultimately, reducing the fatal and serious injury crashes. And we can't do it alone. So both at local, state, and federal level, we need to work together with all of our E's to work through to bring the numbers down. So some of the resources I wanted to share with you. One is the plan. So here's a link to actually download the plan that I spoke through today. And I referenced a DOT Crash Data Academy. We did quite a few in 2016, and we plan to do some in 2017, but I wanted to make you all aware of these. If you're interested in further information, there's actually a section on our Strategic Highway Safety Plan that we did there, but a lot of that presentation not only include the information this morning, but also specific more data that tied in with the plan. All right, so with that, I'm open for questions.
We'll give folks a few minutes to type questions in the chat if they have any. In the meantime, Joe, I mean, it's a lot of information. 13 countermeasures, and you mentioned the highway safety manual. It's a possible place you get ideas. The countermeasure approach. I mean, if you're a new safety engineer of one of our counties that's listed in the top areas for one of the how do they tackle the challenge? Like where do they start? How do they? If you can give any any guidance on that.
So just to kind of let you know, unfortunately, my battery on my laptop there is no
12%.
I'm at 12%. So I'm not going to close it right now. So just if it does break up, that's the reason why. But what I would encourage locals to do is reach out to their local or to their district safety engineer. And also to visit our state safety office website, specifically with highway safety manual information, because we're posting a lot of information there, and then we're keeping our districts in the loop on what initiatives we're doing within that from a statewide perspective. So that would be my recommendation.
Joe, this is Dennis Balloon. Just wanted to tell you that very good presentation, and like Anthony said, a lot of information to run through. Anthony, I don't know if you have a question.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there, and so I'll be honest with you. My focus is on the engineering side, but there's a lot of moving parts with the education and enforcement.
Right.
If anybody has if anybody wants any further information, I can guide them in the right direction, on the education and enforcement. But I lean on other folks to kind of take the lead in with those areas. But so thank you for that compliment, though.
Yeah, here today we're talking to a crowd that's in your wheelhouse because I mean we have mostly engineering, mostly local agencies. So I mean that's we do need to get some of the other folks involved. So something else I'm kind of interested in. I mean, the safety plan gets updated periodically, and I know that one of the major things that gets added is just adding more emphasis areas. But can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the trends or some of the changes since the Strategic Highway Safety Plan first started to the approach now, kind of like the lessons learned, why we're going in the direction that we are?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So, for example, we didn't have commercial vehicles or work zones in our last plan. They were continuing priority areas. And in talking with our partners and others, we decided that we would include those as part of our plan. Ultimately, it's about 0 fatalities. And really, we have to be addressing all of those areas in order to bring the numbers down to 0. Now, I can tell you, though, it is a challenge with having so many emphasis areas, because now it's more areas to keep in the loop on. So it's it's a challenge to help manage. Now, there's some states that are out there that have kept their emphasis areas to just a handful, right, rather than 2 handfuls or plus. So I think we're working through this. It is what it is right now. I think when we update the plan again, I think we'll regroup and try to capitalize on any lessons learned from having so many emphasis areas. But once again, it's ultimately it's about bringing those numbers to 0, and the only way we can get it to 0 is addressing each of these areas.
Yeah, multifaceted long-range vision is kind of the key.
Yeah.
There's a comment in the chat about teen driver education in schools. Why is that not? I guess the question is stated: would the reestablishment of driver educations in schools be a way to get teen fatalities numbers down?
I think that would be a good step. I also think it's just having teenage drivers, you can teach them to be book smart, but there's a big difference between being book smart and being smart on the road, and that just takes time and driving practice. So they're learning the mechanisms of a car and the mechanisms of the other drivers and all that. There's a lot of different moving parts there. So I don't know. I just I think training them and educating them is one thing, but then having them being able to drive more. So that graduated driver's license, a lesson learned for me is the sooner we can get them driving, I think the better. So that's my input.
Was driver competency not considered at some point in the highway safety plan, and it was then removed because it's outside of the scope of what the DOT does because it's taken care of by other agencies? Is that not part of the history of the driver? Is driver competency was that not considered initially in the early highway safety plans, and it was kind of removed because it was determined that other agencies kind of take care of that? Is that not part of the history of the education?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think some of the early highway safety plans talk about why driver competency is not included in them. We can kind of look that up, and I forget the specifics, but I think it was determined that the answer is yeah. I mean, obviously, the better we educate our team, the numbers will go down, but that's like school board. There's other HSMV. There's other agencies that that take care of the licensing and the education of our drivers.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
We're going to lose you in a couple minutes here, Joe.
I'm living on the edge.
Do we have a sense, Joe, in the numbers, like in the state reporting of Florida residents versus tourists? Like, is our fatalities going up for everybody, or is it the locals, or is it the people from out of town?
It's mostly it's mostly the locals. It's mostly the residents. The numbers going up. we do not see a strong number of tourists being involved in these crashes.
Yeah, the roads are pretty safe in Disney. Those Imagineers and their purple signs do a pretty good job.
Right. Yeah. Magic. It's the magic.
The magic. I have a question about the reporting and the crash data. I know that, when you look at the strategic highway safety plan, there's a couple of the categories where, it's kind of a steady trend, then it like jumps and doubles, and then it continues as a steady. That's clearly just a crash reporting. How are these, with the measures and with the need, with the 5% reduction and everything, how do you guys account for the differences when HSMV decides to change the crash form?
Well, it kind of depends. So it depends on what areas. If you're seeing, like on Bikehead, where the numbers are fairly low, or work zones, you might see a trend, substantial change in the trend because the numbers themselves are low. Really on the distracted driving, I think is probably where the reporting is part, but I feel pretty good about the other areas of being properly reported.
Just like when HSMV added a checkbox for what's a driver distracted, man, we saw a big increase in distracted driving crashes.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the other thing is, going back to this fundamental part of a crash, it's fundamentally, it's a combination of errors. It's the combination of a person driving maybe under the influence, going too fast, and drove through a red light at a signalized intersection. So, if that signal wasn't there, they may not have been involved in a crash. Or if they weren't under the influence, they may not have gotten in that crash. So when I speak to crashes, they are random events, purely random events, that the things that could happen at the wrong time. So sometimes these things happen. You might see an increase in a particular crash type because for whatever reason, it's just I can't explain it, but yeah. All right. What else you got? I got 7%.
7% battery. There's no other questions in the chat that are coming in.
Okay.
So I think that we're pretty good. I was actually looking up. Go ahead, Dennis.
No, I was just going to say we can wrap it up unless there's any other questions. If you have something else to say, Anthony, go ahead.
No, I was looking up in the 2006 strategic highway safety plan, Joe. It says that the occupant protection and driver competency emphasis areas were removed because they received sufficient resources and countermeasures that are in place to effectively address these issues through other agencies.
Okay.
So
okay.
That was over 10 years ago, but perhaps that needs to be reassessed. But for the question that was asked into the chat back in 2006.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. Well, there's no other questions in the chat. I'll go ahead and end the recording. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you, Joe. This was a very good update on the highway safety plan, all the emphasis areas. We'll stay on the line for a few minutes if anybody else has anything that comes up, and thank you everyone for attending.